Hi, I'm Meha.
And I'm Steve. And this is HealthTech Stories. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to HealthTech Stories. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Ford Parsons with Providence. Ford is someone that I've worked with for quite a while here, several years. And the thing that has really impressed me, Ford, about the work you're doing is you seem to always be curious and capable of creating solutions to problems. In fact, a lot of what I do normally is to help people get their heads around new concepts, especially around technology and AI. You have kind of done that on your own with your team, and it's impressive. I guess what I would say is it's been very low effort for me, this relationship, and high reward, which is kind of ideal, right? Uh, but anyway, I'm very glad to have you on today. So we're going to talk about some of the solutions that you developed. I wanted to give you a second to just introduce what you're working on, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. Glad to be here. My name's Ford Parsons. I work at Providence, and I lead a team of AI engineers with a strong interest in bringing AI to the bedside. And so some of the products that we're building have to do with in-basket management or provider replies to patient messages. How can we use AI integrated into the clinical workflow so the doctors and nurses don't have to kick out to some other product? How do we allow them to get the best out of AI in the workflow that they're familiar with? And so basically all the stuff that we're working on kind of falls into that category of bringing AI to the bedside.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ford. We are so excited to have you. We can't wait to learn from you more today. We like to start off the podcast with something just like a fun question. You can decide between the two that I ask you, but can you tell us about either your worst or your first job?
Uh, I'm an eternal optimist, so I won't wallow in the worst job. My first job right out of school, I just graduated with computer science degree, and I worked for this startup company in Chicago. I was the low guy on the totem pole, so I drew the short straw on maintaining the VB6 configuration application for a C++ server thing that was doing credit reports. It was an awesome team. It was kind of like a learning experience for me. I think I've forgotten everything I knew about VB6 development, but for a while there, I was the main guy maintaining that. Another funny thing about that first job, or kind of cool thing, when the server went down, you had to drive down to the data center and get retina scanned and hand scanned and go into the cages. That was pretty cool. I didn't have to do it too many times. That probably would have gotten pretty old if I did it more. But at the time, I felt like I was on a spaceship. It was pretty neat.
Oh, that's awesome, man. VB6, that brings back some memories. We'll have to talk about that another time.
Yeah.
I mean, my VB
podcast.
experience goes even further back, but
yeah, I'd
we'll
love to hear it. Yeah.
Later. Great. All right, so we'll just get into it now then. I mean, Ford, literally everybody's talking about AI these days. You can't go online without seeing something about AI, agents, things like that. So there's obviously a lot of hype and noise that surrounds that. Maybe hard to tell what's real and what's not. But you and the Providence team have been solving real problems with AI for quite a while now. I wanted to find out, what's your secret and how do you differentiate what's valuable versus what's the next shiny object?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shiny objects out there. And part of the vaccine against shiny objects is just you've been doing it long enough. You can kind of this feels a little hypey. Let's drag our feet on this one. But I think even more important is the really close connection we have at Providence with our users, with our clinical colleagues. And I think it's easy to be an engineering team that's really separated from your users, or an engineering team that maybe doesn't know a lot about the practice of medicine. If I don't know what's valuable, what do? You kind of what's being talked about on LinkedIn, or what's what's all the hype on Hacker News, and you start going into some um, uh, path that maybe doesn't lead to something ultimately very interesting or valuable to physicians and nurses. And so what I think is pretty cool at Providence, we've got a lot of you know technical doctors and healthcare interested engineers, and we all mix it up together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really convenient to have a colleague just down the hall or down the virtual hall. If you've got a nurse friend or a doctor friend, you can just say, hey, like, what is this useful? Like, what's challenging for you in your operations, or what's challenging for you in your day to day? It's a lot easier to kind of have those ad hoc conversations when you're basically coworkers with your customers. And in some cases, some of these products, I myself am the user of the product, and I myself have had these challenges of finishing up the day in clinic, and I'm not done yet. I've got all this paperwork to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's kind of either being the customer or being best friends with the customer, or colleagues with the customer, I think is the strongest kind of way that we've been able to make sure that we're building stuff that's useful and not building out buzzword compliant, but ultimately not super useful tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been
definitely.
fantastic seeing some of the stuff that's come out of your org.
Well, it's pretty gratifying to to it's pretty gratifying to hear doctors saying, hey, this is better than what I had before. um
Yeah.
it's hard to get doctors to say something is good. I mean, like, maybe I can say that, but so like when they do say, so this is better, you really know you're onto something.
Mm,
Yeah.
great.
I like how you said you have engineers who kind of understand the industry. One, I think that's super important to have, the people that are working on the actual product to talk to the doctors, see what they're looking for, because ultimately that's where you're going to build exactly what's more valuable than the shiny object. So I really like how you address that. The next question we want to ask is, you have described clinicians as conductors rather than copy editors, specifically when using AI tools. Ford, like, could you elaborate on this analogy and how it reshapes the clinician's role in patient care?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, great question. I think I, there's this concept of human in the loop for AI, and I
Yeah.
think everyone says, oh, human in the loop is good. We want human in the loop. Um, I feel like sometimes this concept of having a human in the loop is kind of uh, maybe a kind of medical legal indemnification tactic that vendors use to kind of wash their hands of responsibility, and in some ways kind of create more work for the human that is in the loop. We were looking at different ways to help doctors reply to patient messages. Critically important. Patient messaging is care. Replying to patient messages is clinical care. But if there's ways we can use technology to make that more efficient, let's do it. And we looked at some of the vendors, and it was just kind of a patient message comes in, AI drafts a response. Well, okay, well, now the doctor, instead of painstakingly typing a response, is now painstakingly proofreading a response that some AI prompt generated. And we found they weren't really saving that much time. We just changed kind of one administrative overhead task and turn it into another administrative overhead task.
Yeah.
Um, and so like that's the I agree that in some cases a human in the loop is a good idea, but you want to make sure that you're not just using a human in the loop as an excuse to have the human do different work. And so we kind of tried to reimagine what it looks like to be a doctor replying to a patient in a kind of technology or AI supported way. And that's where we said, let's get rid of this copy editor mentality. Let's allow these doctors to be a conductor. And so the message comes in, we've got one AI that kind of highlights the important points, kind of creates a table of contents to help the doc scan things easier. And then we give a little text box to kind of steer the response in a particular direction. So you're not kind of turfing the clinical decision making to the AI or the prompt. You're allowing the doctor to say in clinical jargon, start this medication or stop this one, or that kind of thing. You can have the spellings, you can use jargon and abbreviation, and then the AI takes that direction from the doctor and turns that into the response, instead of kind of the AI does everything and it's up to the doctors to make sure that it didn't say something wrong. So it's kind of, it puts the doctors in the driver's seat instead of looking over the shoulder of someone else driving.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Obviously, one of the priorities that you have and that Providence has is to reduce caregiver burnout, like make their caregivers' jobs easier by reducing some of the mundane and boring necessary work that they had to do before. Technology can obviously help with that, but one of the concerns that I hear a lot is that, well, AI is great for, drafting emails or messages or something, but how about for patient care? I mean, that seems like you're sort of crossing a line. How have you made AI safe for patient care?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hype and a lot of talk about AI replacing doctors, replacing nurses. We're trying to use AI to retain them, not replace them. We're trying to
Hmm.
use AI to both support those administrative burdens that doctors and nurses wound up being responsible for.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't go to med school to fill out paperwork for insurance companies, but that's part of the job. So I think a lot of the ways that AI can help is taking the administrative stuff off their plates, so they can focus more on the stuff they're uniquely qualified to do: talk to patients, understand their concerns, understand their symptoms, look at them face to face, that kind of thing. I think, and so I want to make sure that we're letting our doctors kind of run the show in terms of clinical care. But there
Hmm.
are some other ways that AI can support them, in addition to taking that bureaucratic stuff off their plate. Uh, Surfacing information that they need to make decisions, more readily. And so ultimately, it's still the doctor talking to the patient, understanding the situation, understanding the information, and making a decision together with the patient. But if we can use traditional technology and engineering or AI to give the right information at the right time, that is going to just empower our doctors and nurses to be that much more effective. So I can give you an example of a product we're doing that's
Yeah.
kind of in that space.
Hmm.
Uh, I especially in the hospital, it's really important to know what a patient's goals of care are, because depending on what a patient is important to them in their life, uh, there are certain interventions that make sense, and there's certain interventions that might do more harm than good, and aren't aligned with the patient's goals of care. Um, it's really hard to have those conversations, and it's really important to have that um, information shared among the care team. And so we've got great hospitalists and palliative care doctors that have this unique skill to really elicit what's truly important to the patient, um, and they ask all the right questions, and they write everything down. Um, but oh gosh, what happens if that documentation gets lost? Like, I'm the hospitalist the next week. It can be really hard to find that incredibly important summary of that conversation that a doctor had with a patient. So we've built fundamentally, it's an information extraction type of like large language model application, but it looks through all the notes and identifies instances where a doctor had this really deep conversation about their goals of care, and surfaces it right in the workflow where the doctors typically find code status and in advanced care planning, all these other components that kind of factor into the care that we want to deliver to a patient. So it's a AI kind of understanding important information, finding it, and putting it in a place that doctors can find it.
Hmm.
That gives me, like the hospitalist next week, more information so I can better take care of that patient. Um,
Got it. Okay, I can see how that would save a lot of time searching and coming up with a list of the care goals where you know the information is already right there somewhere.
And especially if the poor patient just kind of, bared their soul to some doctor,
Mm-hmm.
last
Mm-hmm.
week, and then I come in blind, just having them go through the whole thing again, it kind of makes them feel like, that they either they weren't being heard, or are these doctors even talking to each other?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
we are, but we can also use technology to make those conversations easier.
It's a great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, this is a great example. I think also it helps both sides, right? Like it helps the patient, but also the doctor. And I like how you said finding the right info at the right time. Oftentimes there's so many notes that the
Yeah.
doctors have to take. They're all some of them are consolidated, some of them are all over the place. So being able to find that information quickly not only helps the doctor, but also helps the patient. So I love that example. Kind of going and kind of transitioning a little bit more into what you've been building at Providence. Previously, you had mentioned the development of Provaria, which is for real-time clinical messaging. What can you share specifically about this initiative? And looking ahead, how do you envision the evolution of AI tools like Provaria and specifically transforming the patient-provider communication and just overall care delivery?
Yeah. So I think there's and Steve, like we've talked about Provaria,
Mm-hmm.
the mechanism by which messages come in from patients and they get categorized. And it seems really simple, right? Like we've had email categories for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's not a new capability that's uniquely made possible by large language models. But the categories that are important to our medical assistants and nurses and doctors, they change rapidly over time. It's not like
Mm.
email. You've got spam, you've got ham, you've got updates from Facebook or whatever. In medicine, maybe there's a new pandemic that needs a new category, and so you need to be pretty flexible in your categories. Similarly, the type of messages coming into cardiology are different than the messages coming into OB/GYN, and so the large language models allow you to kind of create that flexibility and that rapid updatability through prompting, rather than kind of the more traditional, get 1,000 annotated notes for these set of categories that, oh gosh, don't make a new one because you're gonna have to start over.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of what we've been working on, is building uh, message classification for ambulatory doctors and nurses. We talked earlier about how we can use large language models to help doctors not proofread and copy edit, but help draft a reply that's grounded in their clinical judgment. And then whenever I'm a hospitalist, whenever I talk to hospitalists, oh, we're doing all this great AI work in the clinic, the hospitalists say, well, that's great, but I don't have any in basket. I'm a hospitalist. I don't. I'm not replying to patient messages. I just walk up to the floor and talk to them. But what hospitalists and other acute care docs and nurses have a lot of, it's these real-time messages. Back in the day, it was pagers. By some miracle, we've somehow moved beyond pagers. It took probably 20 years longer than anyone thought, but
Yeah.
we now can send messages over computers. Super useful. It's auditable. It's trackable.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of suggest orders, and it's very cool. But it does create a lot of interruptions, which if you're in the middle of a challenging conversation, or in the middle of a procedure, or in the middle of a code, even
Mm-hmm.
having your phone ringing off the holster, it can be kind of distracting, and
Yeah.
can lead to feelings of burnout. So that's
Mm.
the next that's the next big place that we're looking to support existing clinical workflows with traditional engineering, health record configuration, but also AI classification, or
Mm-hmm.
um, urgency detection, or things like simple acknowledgments. It's good to have closed loop communication. That's an incredibly important part of healthcare, but you don't need kind of interruptive closed loop communication. You can go back and see, like, okay, I'll do that. It doesn't have to be sent and like distract you from what you're doing.
Hmm.
so that's as our kind of AI helping clinical workflow through improved communication. That's sort of like the next domain for us.
Got it. Yeah, I see you're taking kind of an iterative approach with this. And I mean, some of the ideas sound pretty simple, right? Classifying messages,
Sure.
creating categories for them. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance there, but I think what it's telling me is that, you're not trying to do everything with AI. You're not trying to solve all the problems, but even the solutions that you've implemented have saved a significant amount of time for your caregivers, right?
Yeah, I think it especially for that Pravaria reader, the
Hmm.
in-basket classification system, that has been really useful, because like once you've got categories for things, you can kind of assign people who are uniquely qualified to handle those types of messages to handle
Hmm.
those messages.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just kind of blindly going in, first out, and the important clinical messages are um, behind the what time do you open messages, which it's
Yeah.
important to get them right, but it's not important to get them right like immediately.
Hmm.
And so like because we've been able to assign different people to handle different messages at different times, we saw a decreased turnaround time in kind of how long it takes to get a response for a clinical message.
Hmm.
We've seen, and when that happens, if you can get a reply in the same day, you can maybe even get seen that same day, instead of if the
Yeah.
message takes 24 hours to reply. Well, Monday's gone. You have to come in on Tuesday.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in addition to the kind of better turnaround time for the patients, there's also a dynamic where these nurses and MAs are not driving home filled with anxiety.
Yeah.
Because if you're just hitting these messages first in, first out, you're driving home like, you know, I did 100 messages today. Was messaged 101. Was that substernal chest pain with radiation down the left arm that the patient didn't know was an emergency? And
Mm.
so, like being able to identify these, clinical or new symptom type messages in the morning, that allows patients to get seen faster, and also allows our caregivers to not, be filled with anxiety that they didn't do enough work, and when they're driving home.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that.
that's
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, really making a difference here. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate that as a patient,
Yeah.
knowing, of Providence, knowing that there's some kind of technology that's helping your caregivers to, get their jobs done, working at the top of license, as
Yeah.
sometimes you would say, and being able to respond quicker. So
Yeah.
it's really good for me too.
Yeah.
Um, so as we wrap up, Ford, I know, as I said earlier, you've been on this journey for a while with AI and technology. Um, I think a lot of listeners would maybe be earlier in their journey on this. So, to someone who's just getting started in, AI and um, medical care combined, what are some of the next steps that you would recommend they take?
Yeah, great question. I always, recommend finding the use case first. Like, if you yourself are a clinician, find the thing that you struggle with or that you think has a lot of opportunity to be improved. If you are, an engineer or technologist, find your local nurse or physician and ask them what bugs them about their day, and
Hmm.
they'll probably tell you a few things.
Hmm.
So step one, focus on the use case, make sure you're solving the right problem. Step two, try to make a minimal viable product in the kind of simplest way you can. I think it's easy to reach for agentic frameworks or orchestrated LLMs, but if you can get something that's functional, that uses kind of more traditional deterministic engineering, um, that way you can get your proof of concept in front of clinicians faster, get feedback, and then start making things a little bit more sophisticated as people are using the tool, instead of you kind of closed beta, like no one's using your
Hmm.
tool because you're still building out these complicated and sometimes hard to debug components. So use case and keep it simple.
Yeah, That's
Love that.
always good advice, I think. Great. Well, Ford, thank you so much for coming today, taking the time out of your day to talk to us. It's been really enlightening for me, and we'd love to have you on again.
I would love to talk to you when I've got more stuff that's been deployed. So
Yeah, that would
I'd
be
be happy
great.
to.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your time today.